Good day. Welcome to the Cory Morgan Show. If you're watching in Alberta, it's a nice smoky September day. We got away pretty good this year, actually. The last, few years have been a lot of smoke in the summers. This year hasn't been too bad, but boy, it's really coming in with a vengeance this fall, isn't it? Yeah, it's kind of a subject for another discussion, but whether or not climate change is happening or who's causing it or to what degree. But you got to admit, I was in Alberta my whole life, and we didn't get nailed with smoke like this all the time back in the 70s and 80s when I was a kid. Something's changed there. We talk forest management, things like that. Either way, right now, well, if you got asthma and other problems and issues, you should probably stay inside and just catch up on all those, back issues of the Western Standard and things like that until the air clears a little for you. Got a good show coming up today. I've got Bruce Pardy. He's a law professor from Queen's University. One of those few actually good, common sense, conservative, freedom-loving sort of folks. There's not too many of them in the universities. And we're going to talk a bit about, if we get to an independent Alberta, how do we make sure it's actually a better product than what we just left? How do we preserve the freedoms we're talking about protecting? It's going to be a good conversation. I'm looking forward to that. And we'll have some other stuff and check in with the news and things like that, too. Let me get this the way, though, we're expanding our reach. We're proud to partner, actually, with the Solid Gold Family Radio Network, Alberta's very own internet radio. Fully owned and operated right here at home. You can catch our shows and live streams on Husky on 5, Nashville on 3, Vibe on 2, 3 of the 27 unique channels that Solid Gold Family brings listeners across Alberta. So check them out, guys. It's the future radio. Everything's going streaming. It's sgfradio.ca. And again, just Google them, Solid Gold Radio Alberta, and you can get on there and see a new format. All right, let's talk about some porn. That's what you're all here to watch today, right? It's in the title of the show. Let's see where we can really screw with the algorithms. This alleged book ban in Alberta schools. It's been making news across the country in response to books with pornographic depictions of men performing oral sex upon each other on the shelves of children's libraries. The provincial government set some guidelines. Those monsters. In a performative temper tantrum, the Edmonton Public School Board, though, responded by proposing to pull out over 200 books, including 1984 and The Great Gatsby. Legacy media outlets are gleefully and dutifully reporting that the Smith government is banning books, and leftists are making the most of it. Now, the Smith government has pulled the ministerial order to work on creating something more specific and maybe dumbed down enough for a school board to abide by. It was a political stunt by extreme leftists who are literally willing to keep pornography on the bookshelves of children if it scores points against the UCP government they revile. The faux book ban gives fodder to legacy media outlets and Eastern politicians who try to portray Alberta as some backwater book-banning neo-fascist state. The school board members are playing dumb. They're claiming it's impossible to distinguish between a picture of men with genitals in their mouths and whether or not that's more or less appropriate to be presented to children than The Handmaid's Tale. Well, I guess when you're considering Atwood's stuff, it's pretty vile too, but all the same, I wouldn't call it pornographic, but it's too complicated for them. They're claiming that filtering which books children are exposed to in the libraries would be a form of discrimination against the LGBTQ, ampersand, $, whatever the hell it is, community these days too. Of course. What isn't these days? But don't worry, there was heterosexual porn to be found on the shelves too. Premier Smith, quite masterfully actually, held a press conference where a monitor showed examples of the porn that has been gracing the shelves of Alberta schools while offering to hold the hands of school board members to sort through them if need be. Legacy media outlets didn't show those images from the monitors, however, because they were too pornographic to be shown on television. The conference can be seen in full on social media channels, and independent media outlets gave proper coverage, of course. CTV and CBC preferred to maintain the fake narrative that some sort of heinous book ban is happening. Think about it. The images were too pornographic to be shown on television, yet anybody saying they shouldn't be in children's libraries is a book banner. Rest assured, it's no coincidence this battle happens to be shaping up while Alberta's teachers' unions threatening one of their usual strikes. And that narrative, is always consistent with the teachers' strikes. The union always claims their grievances about classroom sizes, but demands more pay and fewer teachers as a solution. And fewer days working. The more they can villainize the provincial government while they gouge for more pay, the better. And the Edmonton School Board is more than happy to facilitate this latest shakedown. Lost in all of this is the question of how the porn got on the shelves of the children's libraries in the first place. Perhaps once the trash is removed from the libraries, people can take a breath and then investigate who is behind curating the material and making sure that these people lose all access to children and the material presented to them. I understand the battle between left and right in politics in general, but what is with the obsession with exposing children to explicit sexual content? It's distressing, dangerous, and unacceptable. In the end, though, people are ultimately responsible. And the ones who are ultimately responsible are the voters who abdicated their democratic duty to pay attention and participate in municipal elections. The lunatics on Edmonton's public school board were put there by an election. Many people tend to forget these positions are elected due to the fact that few are paying any attention to it. So does it any wonder that extreme flakes use that opportunity to get into these positions of responsibility? Turnouts in municipal elections are embarrassingly low in general, and they're even worse when it comes to public school trustees. People running for these positions are often acclaimed, as nobody wants to bother with what appears to be a dry, low-paying, semi-bureaucratic role. This role, though, involves guiding and influencing our children, which is why it should be considered important enough to make people in those roles face the electorate. That's why they did it. This is a civic election year in Alberta. Take advantage of it, guys. Hopefully, this perverse debacle has inspired voters to take the unusual step of scrutinizing who's on their local school boards and making a choice to vote for sane members for a change. The price for apathy is pretty evident. When we see an absurd pitched battle between a school board and the government over the alleged right to present pornography to children. These nuts must be fired, and the only way people who can do it are the voters. The Smith government's made it clear they'll intervene if need be, and I'm happy they're willing to protect our children, but I'm concerned. I don't want a distant provincial government micromanaging what happens in schools. The point of the school boards was to have local accountability and representation in the school system. This will be lost if the provincial government takes over, though I understand why they might have to. So do your duty this fall, guys. Get out and vote. Fire the extremists who have seeped in and infiltrated school boards and municipal politics in general. It's been said that in a democracy, you get the government you deserve, and that might be true in general. But in this case, our children are getting what you deserve, and the children deserve better. That's what's got me pissing and moaning today, Dave. How's it going?
Good, Cory. Yourself?
Not too bad. I mean, still astounded, and I think I've seen it all. And no, this is the latest political battle that wow.
Just crazy. So I think I know why when you were growing up in the 40s and the 50s, you had less fire smoke.
No.
Less arsonists. We got way more arsonists now.
They do seem to be sprouting up a lot more lately, yes.
Yeah, because most of these forest fires are human caused, so.
Yeah, true enough. No, I said there's a number of things, but there's definitely been a change. I mean, we didn't see this kind of smoke when we were younger, not this much.
No.
Once in a while. But...
No, and as you said, we sort of got away with it during the summer, and now we're paying for it.
Yeah, it's catching up. Maybe it'll blow through soon.
I hear you have a literal bathtub full of honey.
I do. Yeah, the bees really overproduced this year, and Jane, poor Jane, the long-suffering Jane is suffering the mess I've made of the house with everything you touch is sticky, and buckets of half-processed honey are in the bathtub and in the kitchen sink.
250 pounds. That's a lot of honey.
Yeah, those bees really came through this year.
How are you going to get shut of it? Are you going to sell it all? Or?
I just sold some last weekend. I was at an event in Mirror. Jane sells some on Facebook. We got a lot of family and friends who like raw honey, so it's moving along. And the nice thing is, it keeps pretty much forever. So yeah, we will move it, but in the meantime, yeah, we got to live in a sticky disaster.
Well, we've got some in our newsroom kitchen from, is it Mike?
Freedom Honey guy, yeah.
Yeah,
he spikes it.
Who says it's the best honey in Alberta. And one of our new staff members tried it and said it was really, really good. And he says, your honey's going to have a lot to live up to her. So we need some samplers in here, man.
I think he's going to have to be reassigned somewhere distant and cold or something. But in the meantime, I'll see what I can bring in.
That's always an option. So in the news today, fairly busy morning. Our site right now is leading off with a story on blanket rezoning. Perhaps one of the top issues in the upcoming Calgary civic election in October. They sent out a survey to all, 77 candidates responded. All the mayoral candidates, Farkas and Sharp and Davidson, said they would repeal the blanket rezoning. Gondek did not reply, but we already know she voted in favor of it once, so one would assume she's in favor of it again.
Yeah, well, she'd have to vote against her own policy, which...
Yeah. And Brian Thiessen didn't reply either, but by all accounts, he's for it too. Mm-hmm. So there you go. John Carpe, head of the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, has been disbarred by the Alberta Law Society. This all goes back to years and years ago, where he decided he was going to hire a private detective to follow a judge home and see if that judge was abiding by all the COVID restrictions. And he got into a whole bunch of trouble because of that, and it's basically led to his disbarment in Alberta. It's a bit of petty politics because he actually offered to resign a while ago, and they refused to accept his resignation. And he calls it a vindictive move by the Law Society, and says the work of the JCCF will continue unabated.
Yeah.
So, and we think that they do a lot of good work, including helping you out,
They're
right?
covering me with the Siksika Native Band versus Cory Morgan case, and yeah, they do a lot of good work. I mean, it has to be said, though, God knows he's discussed that enough over the last few years. I mean, it really was a bizarre decision. Don't ever bother a judge or a lawyer, but boy, he's certainly paying the ultimate price for it now. It's unfortunate because he's done a lot of good work.
Yep, he has. Sad news today out of the Calgary Zoo. Their adult resident grizzly bear, Skokie, has had to be put down. He was 35 years old. Not sure what that is in human age, but they describe it as the zoo described it as very elderly, and he just got to the point where his quality of life wasn't good enough, and they had to put him to sleep. WestJet is in the news this morning. They've ordered a whopping 67 new airplanes from Boeing, including a whole schwack of new Dreamliners. So that's going to solidify their Air Force, so to speak, for the next several years. Temporary foreign workers also dominating the news this morning. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre held a press conference to say if elected, the Conservatives would completely dismantle the program, end it. And he was asked about naming and shaming the corporations that use them. And Poilievre said they will. Obviously, the big one, I think that's on social media all the time, is Tim Hortons. But there's lots of others out there that will be broadcast. And our Derek Fildebrandt filling in as a reporter this week, I guess. He uncovered a good story yesterday out of Sylvan Lake, where the defensive coach of the high school football team was given the boot, was sacked, so to speak, because he spoke out about transgender and how there seems to be a link between trans people and all the recent mass shootings in the States. It was definitely a link in the most recent one. And the principal of the Sylvan Lake High School didn't like it and fired him. And that has caused a whole mess of protests, students writing letters, fellow coaches resigning, other teachers supporting him. So Derek's going to have a lot more on that this afternoon. If you want to see his first story, it's on the site now.
Right on. I mean, not so right on that a guy got fired for expressing his personal views elsewhere, but glad that it's breaking out. I think people are getting fatigued with it. They're tired.
Yeah.
If he was out chasing and beating trans kids or something, I guess that might be a problem. But where do we stop with this cancel culture?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's probably accountability is where we need to go, right? If people make a really, really dumb decision, then they need to be held accountable.
Well, and I guess those in favor of firing this man would feel that that's what that was. So we'll see as the debate unfolds. We need to have it, though, because there's been a lot of careers lost or people afraid to speak, even on their private time now, over these repercussions on something like that.
And to be clear, this was entirely on a TikTok, had nothing to do. He wasn't presenting to the kids, has never spoken to the kids about it. But my prediction is he'll get his job back.
I got a feeling it's this is Sylvan Lake. For people not familiar with Alberta, that's not liberal country going on.
No, it's probably one of the most conservative areas in the province.
Well, we'll watch with interest. It's fun seeing Derek play reporter. Anyway.
It is. Now he knows how the real world manages.
A little taste of it anyways.
Exactly.
Right on. Okay, thanks, Dave.
You bet, Cory.
Get back to the newsroom and we'll talk to you on the next one.
You bet. Thanks.
That is our news editor, Dave Naylor. And this is when I like to just remind everybody the way we're paying these bills is through subscribers. We don't take tax dollars. We don't want them. And they're not offering them. Actually, we could get them, I think, if we really tried. Either way, we are independent media. So if you haven't subscribed yet, check it out, guys. westernstandard.news/subscription. It's $10 a month. $100 for a year. It's just like a newspaper subscription, and it allows us to keep on these stories, keep out there, and cover that stuff that the legacy media just won't touch. So, again, if you've subscribed already, thank you. If you haven't, come on, get on with it. We can hire some more reporters. All right. Let's get to Bruce Pardy. I've been looking forward to this. And to be honest, it's one of those things I'm surprised it's taken me this long to have him on. It's been one of those things. Geez, I got to get that guy on there, and I haven't done it. So I finally have got him a professor from Queen's University and executive director of Rights Probe, Bruce Pardy. Hey, Bruce, welcome to the show, and thanks for joining us today.
Oh, great to see you, Cory. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, well, it's as I said, I've watched your stuff for quite some time. It's been outstanding. It's unusual to see somebody outspoken in the way you are from academia. It's kind of a rare thing any longer. So that's appreciated in itself.
Well, I think, great. I think amongst university colleagues, I might be regarded as something of a barbarian.
Well, as long as you embrace it rather than shut up over it, it works out. So, there's so much I'd like to cover with you, and there's so much that can be, but I want to talk about just what came up recently on social media, because it's been interesting. You've spoken a lot. Well, you specialize kind of in talking about freedoms, legislation, that sort of thing, how we could take care of it. The issue of digital identification came up, which people are very concerned about, and how government could abuse that, which I fully agree, government could abuse it. I feel that the current move with Alberta's thing might be innocuous, but still it brings up the discussion with our freedoms. And you've talked a lot about independence. We've got these holes in our freedoms, and we might have an opportunity coming if a province becomes independent. Where do we begin, though, then to enshrine and protect those rights? Like, this is more your specialty. If we become independent and just flip into the same system we just left, we aren't bringing ourselves forward at all. And we really need to start having those discussions.
100%. You're right on the money with this, Cory. And the danger is that what we'll get with independence, even if a referendum passes, is we will get basically business as usual, but without Ottawa. And that might be an improvement, but it's not different in kind. What we really need is a new kind of governing system for a new country, because after all, people in Alberta are recognizing that Canada doesn't work very well. And yet there's an awful lot of Canada inside Alberta too. So if you just escape the Canada that is outside Alberta and you don't purge the Canada that is inside Alberta, you end up with a little Canada inside Alberta, and doesn't get you to where you want to go. So we need to embrace the idea that an independent Alberta is going to start from scratch. You clear the table and you think fresh about how you want your country to be governed, what kind of constitution you want. You do not adopt the Canadian Constitution. You instead, my preference would be to take some elements of the American Constitution, but then make your own, because even the American one's not perfect. But you have an opportunity here to do nation building in a way that only comes around like once in a lifetime, if that. So it's a moment in time, and I hope Alberta will embrace it and start fresh with new thinking and a clean slate.
Excellent. Yeah, and that's exactly it. I think of it in the sense of, everybody kind of knows that one guy or girl that keeps going through relationships and splitting and then going right back to a relationship with somebody who's just like the last one. You haven't learned what you had to leave the last time. But as you said, like, what are the models we can look at? We'd want to start with something fresh. That's the great opportunity. But you still want a structure and a basis. You said the American system. I kind of like aspects of the Swiss system. Sure. A whole new hybrid could be built with presumably the best of a bunch of systems, but it would be tough to assemble it as well into a functional way. The timeline makes it tough to do it quickly, right?
Well, yes. So here's my first suggestion, though. And I've got lots of suggestions to offer, but my first suggestion is this. So we are used to a system in which a constitution, if you're lucky, lists a whole bunch of rights. In the Canadian Charter, we have the right to free expression and the right of association and religion and so on and so forth. But that approach is itself flawed. So if you simply try to list all the things the government can't do, here's the system you set up. The Constitution, in effect, gives the state unlimited power, unlimited. So if you think of the legislature and the executive and the courts all together, they have unlimited power. And then your list of rights in your Bill of Rights or Charter of Rights tries to limit that unlimited grant of power. So my suggestion is flip it. Instead of giving the state unlimited power and then trying to restrict it, you start with this proposition. The state can do only those things that a constitution expressly authorizes them to do. It's not a grant of general welfare. It's not a grant of public interest. They cannot do anything that is not expressly listed in the Constitution. And if you do that, you don't need to list rights because you have freedom, because the government isn't empowered to censor you or to restrict your religion or to, as the case may be.
So, I mean, the philosophy of that sounds magnificent. The reality is, though, I guess in a governing system, we still end up handing it some degree of authority and responsibility to some sort of governing power. And of course, when they overreach, and it won't be an if, it's just the nature of them. What sort of things could we build in then as a recourse for the citizens to be able to push back and say, hey, you've violated our structure. This can't happen. Not just another finger wagging. We got to do something to make sure they're accountable.
Right. So one other thing that we do in our system, as with the Americans and across the Western world, is we have an entrenched political class, both in our elected chambers like the House of Commons and the Alberta legislature, in the bureaucracy, which people are calling the deep state, understandably, and in the courts where judges sit for a long, long time. So you have a vested interest, a constituency that has an interest in an expansive presence and power for the state. So one other thing that you do in combination with the first idea is you have severe term limits. You'd say nobody can work for the state in any capacity for longer than a certain number of years. You pick something at random. Let's say 6 years. 6 years in, and then you're out. And then there's no reason for you to want an expanded state presence because you're not going to be part of it anymore. And so you disempower both the institutions and the individuals in the institutions so that you get rid of the dynamic of having powerful individuals running what are supposed to be democratic institutions. So in this kind of a situation, you would get rid almost immediately of things like the very heavy lobbying presence and the regulatory capture. People are not going to be there very long, and so it's not worthwhile trying to influence what they do.
That's interesting. And as you said, that some of the term people use is the deep state. Something a lot of people forget that, the politicians come and go, but these deputy ministers, senior bureaucrats, ones that you can't name unless you go digging deep into the government books, they're there for a long time. They're usually extremely well paid. And they often actually will tell the ministerial office what to do, even though people don't realize it. But at the same time, just to play devil's advocate, some of those roles, a bit of continuity and consistency of leadership might help with some of the efficacy of their departments. I mean, if you're turning it over too regularly, couldn't that lead to other disruptions?
Well, quite possibly. But here's the change in thinking. So you don't want your government doing very much. And you don't want it to be too efficient. And you don't want all the expertise to be in the state. You want it to be in the private sector. And so you don't want to attract the best people. And you don't want them to be there very long. And you don't want them to be all that effective. So one of the great aspects of the American system, and in fact, one of the aspects that people fault it for, is gridlock. You have a Senate and you have a House and you have the president, and nothing ever gets done. Well, part of the beauty of it is that things don't get done. You don't want government doing too much. And so if you don't have the best, most efficient people in the deep state for very long, that, for my money, is a good thing. What you kind of want is not a professional bureaucratic class. You want, if I can put it this way, you want a bit of amateur government so that the expertise is in the private sector.
Well, you don't hear me disagreeing at all with any of that. So an interesting aspect of this, one of the commenters brought it up, Jordan, let's say we get to the point, Alberta or maybe another province or whatever says, okay, we've done it. We're out. We've had a referendum. The country is negotiating in good faith. We've drafted this big system, but it's not like just turning a page. How can we deal with the transition? We can't have a void where there's no system, but just flipping over from a one to a radically different one. You can't quite ease into it, but you can't quite go without one either. Have you put thought into how that might be able to work?
Right. So it's a very good point. And transition is going to be tricky and has to be considered in great detail so you don't end up with a vacuum. But I think I imagine it this way. If you're thinking about a new constitution, then you are thinking in two different ways. Number one is the permanent one. Like, how do you want the constitution to be from now on in this new country? And on the other hand, the question that you just asked was, all right, so how do we move from where we are to that? What kinds of detailed, even constitutional provisions do we need to require the state to back off on all the things, all the restrictions that are going to be included in the Constitution? You have to, of course, on the next day after the conclusion of the negotiations, you have to have a path forward for the institutions of the state to be able to just dissolve themselves and transfer their powers and so on. It's a detailed list, but it is remarkably doable, I think, as long as you have the set of principles that tell you where you're going. And I think that's the most important part. If you know where you're going, then the task of transitioning from here to there is a very doable thing.
Yeah, well, and there's no doubt it would be challenging and difficult, but anything worthwhile always will. I mean, some people also play whataboutism to stop any positive changes because they can list all the challenges that'll come. And sure, there'll be some, but they can be surmounted. As you're saying, I mean, the more planning done, the better then. So part of the problem we got right now in Alberta, for example, though, we've got a clock ticking right now. We might be holding a referendum as early as into 2026. I think some circumstances are really going to have to change before we hit the point of a large positive yes in Alberta. But who knows? These are interesting times. If that comes about, like how should Albertans be preparing, or even Quebec? It's starting to building up over there. Should there be even in advance of this some sort of general meetings or something where people can get together and formulate the kind of constitution we'd need?
I think it might be time for that. I do. So the message at the beginning of this path was, well, let's not worry about that just right now. Let's get to the referendum, get across that threshold, and then we'll worry about what it looks like over the hill. I think you're close enough now that you need to have those conversations at least starting, and at the same time as well, people, certain constituencies, parties have been putting forward visions of what it should look like, and so there's really no justification now for restraint. Let's all talk about what the new Alberta is supposed to look like, and there are going to be conflicts and disagreements about that, and that's inevitable. We shouldn't try to avoid those, because one thing that will take this over the finish line is if there is an expression of vision, if people understand what kind of a new society they're trying to achieve. I've said before that in some ways Alberta has the opportunity to become the beacon of Western civilization in this adventure. And if you don't grab it, it'll be missed. And so that's the kind of conversation, the kind of constitutional conversation that I think ought to be starting.
Yeah, well, I hope you help us out with those. I'm hoping that we get some groups, whether it's the APP or others, starting that sort of discussion. Because what we're asking Albertans to vote for in a referendum is to basically either have a smaller version of the same state, as we said before, which really isn't an improvement, or leaping into a void where, okay, we'll iron out those details the day after the vote. And I got a lot of people might just say, well, I'm not ready to vote for either of those yet. So we got to get something together, but it's not, it's going to take a lot of debate, as you said. When I led the Alberta Independence Party, boy, depressingly over 25 years ago, I had to have at least 8 or 9 constitutions sent to me, and these were printed out, and mailed. I mean, the email documents weren't that good. I mean, people were already thinking of that, but they're also, every person who drafted these ideas for constitutions, that was a hill for them to die on. That was their baby. That was their creation. And they would turn on their heel and stomp out of the room if they didn't get that in whole. So I think the organizers of this should understand that this is going to be a big, large process. Maybe it's the sort of thing they can work on while they're waiting for the courts to deal with whatever's going on the referendum question.
Why not? Why not? That makes sense to me.
Well, great. we're much on the same page, and it's just as I said, such singular times. As you said, once in a lifetime. Where people in a lot of countries, they'll just never get that opportunity in a lifetime, and
never. It would never come up. And yeah, so I hope Albertans will seize the day. This is your moment, folks.
Well, we've got to make the most of it. There's a lot of moving parts, but that's one I don't think there's been enough discussion on. I really appreciate, what you've added so far. I listened to you when you came out to Calgary and spoke as well, and stuff on this from a surprising source from out of the Eastern establishment. You've been very helpful for us out here, and I hope you continue to be. So before I let you go, I know you work with, you're the executive director of Rights Probe, and where else can people find your work?
Yeah, well, we have a website, rightsprobe.org. I also have a Substack page that people are welcome to subscribe to. And on X, I'm at Pardy Bruce.
Excellent. Well, I recommend folks check it out. Have a look at Bruce Pardy. Lots of wisdom to come from him. The time wasn't long enough on this show segment, but we covered some ground, and I really appreciate you taking some time to speak to us on that today.
Appreciate it, Cory. Thanks for having me on.
Great. Thanks. Hope we can talk again soon. So yes, and again, so you know what? I'm going to get on that a little. I mean, I'm an independent among the independence movement. I just kind of do my own thing. People don't have to wonder where I'm coming from, but I'm not a member of any group or party or anything else. But I'm going to nag a bit. Let's get some conferences going. Let's get some discussions going. Let's fill that void. I mean, right now, the APP, for example, has been holding a lot of meetings all over the province and packing houses and rooms and doing quite well. But they're all just preparing for this referendum, for the petitioning, which is important. But how long can you keep spinning your wheels? You got a few months to spare now while we wait for yet another court ruling. Well, let's have these constitutional discussions. This is a big undertaking and an important one. Let's see some of the comments from Angry Canadian says a new Alberta $10 bill featuring Cory Morgan. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, you might have seen the headshot I shared on X. Yeah, I'm not that photogenic when it comes to those things. You must be indeed an angry person to wish that upon Albertans like that. But all the same, the rate our currencies are depreciating. That'd be a whole other discussion too, actually, is what's the currencies would be. That's the hardest part in a lot of ways for the independence movement, is answering all the questions. A person can kind of defeat it by just keep running down. Well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And there's groups working very hard filling those questions in. But a big one is the system itself. And you want to make something better. And there's a risk. There's a risk. You could actually come out of it and make something worse. My biggest fear is that you get a smaller state that's run by authoritarians that don't respect individual rights. And then they're even more empowered than they used to be. We got to remember the type of person drawn to leading in those spots is often, even if they might begin well-meaning, they want to lead, they want to control, they want to tell people what to do and how to do it. So their instinct might not work in your best interest when they're at the point of drafting these things. So the irony of it is we want individual freedoms, and the people we put in the front to pursue them are people who actually don't necessarily intrinsically respect individual freedoms. So we've got to speak up. We got to speak up as individuals. We got to take part in this sort of stuff to make sure that our own interests are represented. Maybe I'll call it, a bit of a theme to the show today, because I was annoyed, as I said, with these school boards, these horrific school boards. Yet they were elected, guys. We put them in there. I'll say we. I will admit, because I had to look up, and I've already forgotten her name, who the school board trustee is in my area down in Ward 3 of the Foothills County. I mean, I like to think if I still had kids in school, I'd be paying closer attention, but I should anyways. I still have a right to vote. I didn't know. We've got to watch these bloody school boards, and we got to take part. And likewise, if you want an independent Alberta or independent Saskatchewan or independent combination of the two, or Quebec, which is really starting to get exciting over there where things are moving, you got to take part if you want it to be in your interest. It's the only way. If you keep handing it off to someone else, your interests won't be served. So you've got to get up and get at it. And that's what nobody ever likes to think about or hear about sometimes. Let's see some of the other stuff going on. This is one that I think is going to get a lot of discussion. As Dave mentioned on the news update, Poilievre has come out and announced, that he's demanding an end to the temporary foreign worker program. And so people are really applauding that. And I'm kind of mixed. Now, I understand how that's a smart political move as an opposition leader to push, because you can say it, you don't have to really deal with it. And it's an issue that needs addressing, and it's one that can really get people, worked up and realizing how broken it is. Because why, for example, when it comes to areas like Tim Hortons or unskilled areas, why are they needing to import people? Why can't we find local? But there's a bigger discussion to be had. I owned a service company, or a food service company. The locals don't want to work in it. And people say, well, just pay more. Okay. The consequence of that is your cup of coffee is going to double in price. And I tell you what, despite what people claim, they piss and moan really quickly when what they pay for suddenly goes up a bit. I remember a huge discussion, just to go into the anecdotes, when I owned my pub and cafe, minimum wage kept getting hiked up on us. So, it's just natural. I had two options. I could either reduce the food costs or increase the price. I usually would, try to do it in a combination of both. And in one case, because we used to give out a massive plate of nachos, and they were really popular. You get a giant, it's a good sharing item, and it was a good price, and you could sit at your table and eat. But as a restaurant owner, you would see a lot of those plates would come back with a quarter of it uneaten, because it was such a large portion and not everybody would eat the whole thing. So that's a good area I can actually scale the size and the portions down a bit. And one fella noticed that fast. Boy, he went off. Like, holy cow, what have you done? You shrunk my nachos and lost it on me and everything. And I had a debate with him at the table. I said, well, I had to give all my kitchen staff another $1.50 an hour raise, and I got to deal with that somehow. I could have raised the price of the nachos a bit. Well, he would have complained about that too. What I'm saying is, it doesn't mean that we should just keep using TFWs, temporary foreign workers, to keep filling the voids. But it's not as easy as just flicking a light switch and throwing them all out. We've got some systemic problems going on in general with our economy and with our system. And the temporary foreign worker program has been abused, and it's being used incorrectly, or maybe there shouldn't be one at all. That's certainly up for debate. But people saying just stop it right now and we'll deal with it later. I saw some of that discussion on X. Just who cares? We'll just stop it, deport everybody, and it'll be okay. We'll fix it. It'll fix itself. Well, you're not having a closer look at how economics works. And if you rattle all your industries and your economy like that with such a shot, our economy's already been getting a lot of rattling lately. The cost is going to reach you. That's who the end consumer always ends up being. So I think he's on the right track. I do think we should be going after that program. I think something that was funny and hilarious out of the whole thing, it was discovered that the CBC, yes, our state broadcaster, uses temporary foreign workers. But we're being a little too simplistic to think that we can just shut something like that down and kick out all the people working within it and not pay some heavy consequences. The term, and I know it doesn't sell as well in a political soundbite, and that's part of why, Poilievre's no fool. He's just talking about going after the system as a whole and naming and shaming particular companies that are abusing it, fine. But, just because it makes good political points doesn't mean it makes for better policy later. But he knows that. Oh, yes. And speaking of government waste, didn't we see that, and performative actions? Doug Ford up there at the microphone, tipping over a big bottle of Crown Royal that could have been donated to Elizabeth May. Now she's just going to have to keep getting gin at full price. But really, it's just this foolishness. All this tells me with this stupidity going on, and whether we sell or Canadian carry boozes that are distilled in the United States or in Canada, I don't think the government should be in the booze business at all. We got to get them out of that. It's in Alberta. It's true. It's Ralph Klein. It was one of his greatest moves is he privatized the liquor stores. He got us right out of it. And all the unions, everybody said the world would end and everything. Yeah, it sure ended all right. We used to, for those not gray as me, I'll explain. You could only get booze from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. There'd be the odd store open on a Saturday. You could only get warm beer. There were 4 different kinds, and those jerks would go on strike every couple summers. That was our liquor selection back in the day until Ralph privatized it. The problem is that he privatized the retail end, but the distribution is still totally provincially controlled. That is all AGLC in Alberta. Ontario's got their beer store and other things. And just government it's one of those areas that's heavily entrenched into liquor. I think it used to be more on laws based on morality. This gets back to what Mr. Pardy was speaking of earlier, that the freedom's lost. The government's doing it for your own good, and eventually the government does it for its own good. The other thing is lucrative. It makes a lot of money selling booze, whether you're on the distribution level or the retail level or wherever we're at. The government takes a heck of a bite from it, and then on taxes on top of that as well. But it also allows them to start using liquor for things like posturing, as Doug Ford did the other day with his weird dance between being a liberal, being a conservative, he's being whatever he thinks he has to be. We know what his eyes are on, though, or on Poilievre's job. He's just not sure when the opportunity is going to get there for it. Let's see. We're talking the Alberta Next panel tour is still happening in Alberta. That's where Premier Smith has been going around. And it's funny how things get changed, right? The press was all questioning her on the book ban. No, it's not a book ban. The problem is porn in children's schools. Let's keep that subject where it's supposed to be. But her thing was supposed to be on holding meetings around the province on how to deal better with Ottawa on government incursions. And it started to wind down. I think they're kind of hearing their own things. A lot of what I think was coming out of this was the provincial government just kind of trying to get the answers they wanted to see in the first place. It's a bit of a self-indulgent thing, but that's okay. I like what they're looking to hear out of this. But it's important. They're holding the meetings. Get out there and speak. There's a few more left. Check them out if you want to get there in person. I mean, credit due. How often do you see a sitting premier willing to sit in the front for hours around the province, all over the place, in these kinds of very public meetings with an open mic? Naheed Nenshi, that pathetic excuse of an NDP leader in Alberta, he won't allow open questions at the town hall meetings, those sparsely populated ones he's trying to hold. Smith is ready to get in the front line and take the heckling and the yelling, and there's some of that at these meetings. So hopefully something productive comes out of it, though. It'll be interesting to see what their conclusions are. See some of the comments. Jordan saying, I like bourbon and rye. Yeah, and I mean, I abuse my privileges. I've been open about that on the show and everything. I haven't drank for some years now. I got to say, between the two, though, I always really preferred bourbon. Boy, I like a nice bourbon. Oh, I miss bourbon. But my own fault. I can't responsibly consume it. But I don't fault those who want to. You want to strike a blow against the United States, though, I think there's better ways to do it. Jason Corp saying, it's a book ban. No, it's not. It's a porno ban. It's funny that narrative keeps going back to that. Who generated this list of books that were to be pulled off the shelf? Not the government. The school board did that. Smith didn't do that. The school board did that. The school board did it to give a middle finger to Premier Smith. The school board was upset that Premier Smith has said you can't put porn on the shelves in Alberta schools anymore. And because the school board was so stupid and so perverse that they allowed porn to get on those, and the Alberta minister has been putting lists, because people say, well, what schools? Is it one school, two schools? No, dozens of schools. 4 books that were beyond the pale. And then the Smith government wrote some rules saying this is what's not to go on there. So this school board's so upset that the porn might get pulled down, said, well, we're going to follow these rules to a T and apply that to all these classic novels and historical novels and pull them off the shelves because we'll claim she told us to. They're making hay of it. It's a political stunt. It is not a book ban. It's a political stunt by a school board full of leftist lunatics who prefer child porn not child porn, but pornography exposed to children, just so they can score points against the premier. Rather than just saying, geez, something went wrong. This stuff's not appropriate. Let's get it off the shelf. It's funny watching some of the other discussions. Well, the kids are getting exposed to it anyways on their phones. Okay, fine, but that's not the school's role. Just because they get exposed to it there doesn't mean the school has to expose them to it as well. I first found porn when I was a kid because I found a rolled up Swank magazine in the bottom of my father's golf bag back in the 80s, and off into the woods a few of us went to read it. Yes, even back then, kids would find it and read it, but we don't need to facilitate it, and it's certainly not the bloody role of the school to. Is there even a grain of common sense to, somebody speak up and look at that and say, geez, maybe this shouldn't be on the shelf. But instead, they did a pushback and a fake book ban. They fabricated a whole new issue rather than just actually address something that's a bloody problem. If you just pull the damn books in the first place, say, yes, I guess these don't belong in front of elementary school children. Pictures of men going down on each other. That's what it is. Look it up, guys. I'm not putting it up on this site. That's what they were giving to our kids. And for having others to play that game, it's a book ban. No, it's a porn ban. Children in front of children. Adult people can watch all the weird stuff they want. That's their business. Why is it so hard to distinguish? It isn't. Not going to make it political stunts. All right, I'm all ranted out. Thank you all for tuning in. We've got Pipeline coming on a little later tonight with our panel. We'll break down a few more issues as well. Of course, Nigel Hannaford has got his show going, and there's all sorts of Western Standard content coming up all the time. So like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff. It helps us get the word out there and stay independent. Thank you very much for tuning in today. We will see you all again next week at this time.